glad to be here with you again. My name is Angelica and I'm the Director of Organizing with the Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. And today I'm accompanied by Kidiah Roberts. And so would love if you could introduce yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. I am Kidiah Roberts, and I am one of 3 co-founders of YD Convo Starters. We originated back in late 2022 after the untimely murder of my brother, Kidiah Roberts. And it originally started off as just an apparel line that was trying to pay homage to him because he was such a vibrant person who always wanted his own clothing brand. And we went through an accelerator program for small business owners and really quickly realized that wasn't really what our mission was. We were told a lot by our mentors to find our why. Why are we doing this? Why are we continuing to show up even after the accelerator classes are over? Even after we weren't getting any sales, we were still promoting our brand. And it really changed our perspective on how we overall looked at our brand and realized that through the time that we've lost him, what's really been helping us and what we've been doing all along is having conversations, which is what we're doing today. But we would sit on the phone for hours talking and trying to map out what we wanted the future of the brand to be, and also just like dwelling on the memories of him, talking about things that we knew about him, catching up his best friend, because though they were friends, she knew him from a friend's lens. We knew him from, we being my mother and myself, knew him from a family lens, and really just trying to figure out what happened along the way that led him to unfortunately being killed in the Boston area.
Yeah. And so first and foremost, I want to take a moment for thank you for being here, but also sharing that aspect of your story.
Thank you.
I always like to try to hold space for that, especially when folks are coming to this work as survivors, and just holding space, and then also acknowledging that we're talking about a fairly sensitive topic in general here today. And
Absolutely.
so if you need any moments, a break, feel free to let me know. Happy to take those as we go along.
Okay.
But that actually sounds really perfect. What you hit on in your intro, and which I'm really thankful for, is that you talked about that what's your why, right? And so at the Coalition, we often talk about that what's your why, what's that driving factor through the lens, and what's pushing us in wanting to advocate for gun violence prevention. And so for you as someone who has now become a violence prevention advocate, I'd love to hear more about, if you feel comfortable, how gun violence has personally impacted not only you, but also your community as well.
Yes. So I'll speak from both the community aspect as well as just myself personally. As I mentioned, my brother was killed in 2022. Prior to that, my uncle was murdered by his best friend, who I knew, grew up with, and was around constantly. So that was very a big shock to our family. And prior to that, I also lost my cousin. So I had 3 big, men in my life who lost their life. And, 2 out of the 3 had also been, people who had impacted some sort of violence to other people, as well as, lost their life at the end. And I think, after losing my brother, I felt like all the men in my family were just disappearing. I have 4 other brothers, and another one of my brothers had been to jail. He's here with us, thank God. And then, my cousin, the one that I lost, his brother just got out of jail and now is going back to jail after 10 years, So I just wanted to do something to figure out what's happening in our community, because as we were speaking earlier, I feel like, I'm an outsider. I'm not in the streets. I'm not, directly connected, even though I have family members who are still active in the streets, who are still, who have gotten out of jail and are still doing the wrong things because they just don't know anything else. I just wanted to figure out their story, what's happening with them. I have so many people surrounding me that are struggling, and my brother was right in front of me, and unfortunately I was blind and I didn't even know what he was battling until he was gone. So it really just made me take a deeper look into everything that's happening. And again, our brand is really focused on conversations and talking, and I feel like growing up he did a lot of talking, but I don't think we were really listening. So I want to do a better job this time around. I'm raising his 9-year-old daughter, and she is a talker. She is a person who is expressive and she wants to talk about everything. And, she's dealing with the grief of losing her dad and also not being with her mother and being raised by her aunt and her uncle. So I want her to feel like she can talk about all of the struggles and feelings that she's experiencing so that she doesn't, in turn grow up and decide that she wants to take another alternate route like my brother did because he felt like no one understood him.
Right. And yeah, there's so much. I just want to say immense appreciation, right, for you being here, for you being able to sit with me and to share these stories.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the biggest things that stuck out to me to what you said, right, and I even think of, my own personal experiences with gun violence and in community, was what you had mentioned, right? When we think about our young people in general, but especially as you mentioned your brother, right, they may be talking, and sometimes it is with words and sometimes it isn't.
Yeah.
And the adults in the room oftentimes aren't the ones who are really listening.
Yes.
And that's why we tend to see, again, that cycle of violence continue to perpetuate itself.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say I appreciate that's an immense piece of like the work that we're doing in general, the reason why we're here.
It took me becoming a parent to understand that because, when you're raised by a single mother who's working, like my mom worked so many jobs just to be able to like say, I bought my kids a house. Like, we were in Springfield where the gang activity is very prevalent. I was dating dudes that were in gangs or doing those things. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, why am I surrounding myself with this? But then telling also, telling my brother, don't do that. But then I'm here engaging with people who are also doing those things. It just made me realize like, I put my mom through a lot. My brother put my mom through a lot. And being a parent is very hard. And there's so many things that your children are exposed to that you do not know until it's right there in your face. And you just try your best to prevent things, but you don't want to shelter your child because I do feel like, for me, I was blind, but also sheltered because I was a girl. So I feel like, my brother had a lot more freedom than I did to be able to do things that he wanted to do. And I was very much like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm going to listen to my mom. I'm not going to do those things. And I knew that I wanted something better, but it took me leaving Springfield to get there. And unfortunately, he went to jail before he was able to, experience what life really is and that there's things beyond the community that we were surrounded by.
Yeah, and thank you for that addition. And something else that I pull out from that thread that I think is super important is thinking about choices, right?
Yeah.
That key word there that stuck out to me too, and thinking about, much like how you outlined that there often are circumstances where our young people don't have a choice, right? So we can say, the right and the wrong choice, but what do our young people do when they're presented with equally wrong choices or equally choices that could have negative consequences? So if I were to alter my language a little bit, and thinking about how that's also a deep impactful, right? So you don't have many opportunities or many other options within, whether if it's the confinements of your community, your family, society overall, like what do you do? And so I appreciate you talking about those aspects around choice. Yeah, I'm going to jump into our next question. And so this one talks a little bit more around community engagement. So feel free, I know that you also work in the mental health space, so feel free to kind of answer this question through the lens of that work or also through the work that you're doing with your organization and your business that you have. So we know that community engagement is crucial in addressing gun violence. How do you envision communities coming together to safely address the issue of gun violence effectively?
That's a good question. So I think one thing that sticks out for me is, when we first started our brand, we just wanted to do something to bring the community together. Fun fact, all three of us are in different areas right now. My mom's in Georgia, I'm in Stoughton, and our third founder is in Plainfield. So we're all kind of scattered, but originally we were in Boston or in the Boston area. And we were like, we just want to do something, an event to, that was special to us and bring everyone together. So we got a bunch of different small business owners to come in and do this event. We called it Break the Silence, Stop the Violence. And we were brand new. and we just posted it on social media just to see who would act on it. We ended up having the Worrell brothers come out. They gave us a citation for doing, something positive in the community. We had a good relationship with the Peace Institute because, when you lose someone to homicide, the Peace Institute does step in if it's in the Boston area, and they took care of everything. There was so many things that we were unknown to because, we've been to so many funerals, but like planning a funeral for someone that is, your brother, your son, and not even living here, it was very hard for my mom to even navigate that space and understand what she needed to do. So luckily we did have my grandmother who also lost her son, which was my uncle, to point us in that direction. So the Peace Institute really helped out with that. And through that, we were able to really network and meet other people that were doing so much good work in the community that we had no idea about. Like, I live in Stoughton, I'm very disconnected from that. And, this really helped. So that event we put on, we met a lot of organizations that are doing good work. And that, I think that was our biggest impact, I want to say, because from there, I met you at a Peace Institute event, and so many other people. We had a mental health therapist there from Beth Israel, and I still, stay in contact with her. Also, working at Casa Esperanza, I was able to know about different behavioral health facilities that are also doing good work in the community. Constantly talking with my boss about that and just trying to be in the know. I think the next step that we want to do, which we have not really done, is really getting out there and talking with all these people that we met, and really setting meetings and talking with them and trying to be in their next events and really showing more support and trying to, network as much as we can, because that was something that, starting a new brand, you don't know what to do. Like, you meet so many good people, you have all these opportunities, but then, like, what's the next step? And for me, I was like, I'm shy. I can talk when it's one-on-one, but like, you're saying you want me to reach out and then do what? Like, so it was, yeah. So what we're doing now is really starting our next chapter of really trying to embrace all of the networks that we have made, network connections that we've made.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think the term that also comes to mind, and yes, strong on my organization as well, is thinking about coalition building, right?
Yeah.
It's such a vital piece, not only in gun violence prevention, but in everything that you do, because those relationships that you're making interpersonally are what creates that people power, right?
Yeah.
That can create a movement that can move forward and create change. And so I think that's amazing to highlight that.
Yeah.
Like, again, and I even think of, like you had mentioned, the piece of the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, right? It's so vital to communities, and especially when we think across the Commonwealth, there's so many different disparities, right, that
Yes.
come up around that access to services like that. And so the fact that they're able to hold space, not only for residents in the Boston area, but, I know folks from my community of Brockton that have also received services. I know
Yes.
you highlighting you and your family for folks who don't live here and the people that do. And that's immense work.
Yeah,
right? CVI work that's
absolutely.
happening to be able to hold space.
They're great.
In our communities.
They're great.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I guess the second part, and I think you answered that fairly well, so I'll jump to the next one, was really around like what's the role for grassroots organizations and aspects like that. And so I think you did fairly well, but feel free to jump in if you want to add anything else about kind of that broadening of the table and inviting folks in.
I think I have to say, I'm speaking to this from like the behavioral health side of things. Working at Casa Esperanza has really broadened my horizon of what is going on in our community when it comes to mental health and when it comes to substance use. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to attend Association of Behavioral Health meetings and like listening to the different policies that they have in place, and just kind of what all of the other nonprofit organizations are experiencing. And I think really getting something that Casa Esperanza does a really good job of is like really pulling from the community directly. So some of the people that work at Casa Esperanza, which some people don't know, are already in recovery. So they are not only helping, other people who are going through their things, but they understand it because they're, a victim, but they're also a survivor, which is one of the shirts that we have for YD Convo Starters, because it's true. Like, just because you went through something traumatic, or you're struggling with addiction, or, you've done horrible crimes to people. If you have the means to want to turn your life around and do better and really help other people in the community, I think that that's important. And I feel like there's a lot of organizations who look down on those people and try not to let them in, but they need to let them in because people need to hear what they have to say, because those are the ones that are really being exposed and directly impacted from what's going on.
Right, and I 100% agree. I think, when we acknowledge these issues, so whether it's gun violence or like you had said, if it's addiction and so forth, that when we allow survivors to really lead the way, that is the solution, right? We have the solution. You need to let those folks who have felt that impact be able to push what our agenda needs to look like and what the work needs to be so that we can create sustainable solutions. And so
I agree.
I appreciate that. The other question that I had is more centered on root causes of gun violence. And so I was curious from your perspective what you think the underlying root causes of gun violence are in general, or if you want to look at it at the lens. I know you had mentioned Boston, so if you want to talk about Boston.
So I definitely think education and people's environment plays a huge role in what the gun violence, because like I mentioned to you earlier, having a brother that was raised in the same home, we went to the same schools and we did almost the same things up into a point. Once we got to high school, he was expelled from our high school, which was like the top high school in Springfield, for one act, and then he's sent to an alternative school. But what they don't realize is when you're putting a bunch of kids who they label as bad or can't be tolerated in the education system, and then you put them all together, they're just going to influence each other because there's no actual positive person to influence them. So they're all, cohabitating together, and then they decide they don't want to be there. They want to go where the rest of their friends are, or see and do whatever they feel is more welcoming to them. And I think that's where it starts, like having a school that is not so strict on, you got into a fight, well, why did you get into a fight? Like really getting to the root cause of why these children are acting out, or why they are, choosing to buy or get a gun from someone else and do these crimes, is really the root cause of it, is really talking, having those conversations and understanding what's going on at home. Do they have any other outlets aside from hanging out with their friends on the corner? Like, you don't know what anyone's background is. And I think if you just sit there and say, you can't be here anymore because we don't tolerate that and we don't want our image to look bad, then you have a bunch of people who are like, okay, well, they're not listening, so I'm going to make some noise,
Yeah. And I appreciate that one too, because as we spoke a little bit earlier for the audience, but what I think what was great about what we talked about when you had highlighted this piece was, again, thinking about those other issues. And again, that's another segue for another time. When you can blatantly name the school to prison pipeline, and thinking about how our young people can quickly be system involved from a very young age, just based on these inequities that exist. And so I think that's super important to highlight. The other item I want to talk about too, and if you could even talk about it in the context of growing up in Springfield, so drawing on your upbringing, how do you believe factors such as poverty, lack of access to resources, and systemic inequities contribute to that prevalence of violence that happened?
Heavily, because it's hard because, like I mentioned to you, my mom tried really hard to not have us in what they, considered the hood of Springfield, or those urban areas where all the violence was happening. So she, worked a lot of jobs to get us to have, a house and be separated from that. But it doesn't, even if you're separated from it, you're still going to be affected by it, because you're going to go to school. You're going to go to after school. You're going to be around other people who have other different environments, and they're going to take you to their house, and you're going to see how they live. And then you're going to say, you can make that choice. Do you want to go back to your nice house? Do you want to do this? Or do you want to be with your friends, or whatever the case may be? So I feel like it really just depends on I think it's your environment. I really do. I'm big on your environment, but also your support. Because being a parent myself, I feel like I give props to my mom. I can't do it by myself. Like, she didn't know, we didn't have a lot of family in Springfield. It was just us. So a lot of times she was seeking outside help to kind of, take us to after school programs or help out because she's working a double shift or things like that. So when you have people that are coming into your little bubble, you don't know what their intentions are. You don't know if it's going to be positive, if it's going to be negative, or how your child is going to take that and then go and live their life when they get older. And as a parent, you're just trying to do the best that you can, to give them the life that you want them to have. But then at the same time, you're not there to understand what they're seeing on the regular basis.
Right. And I think what I love about that response as well, right? So parents, trying the best that they can too. But I think what I also draw on as well when I think about root causes is also thinking about where there's also gaps within
Yes.
communities, right? And I really think about the Springfield community want to hold space. We have a plethora of member orgs in that area, some of which I'm
Really?
in continuous conversations with.
Yes.
Yeah, so again, like I think of one of our member orgs specifically, not to go too much on a tangent, but the Daryl Lee Jenkins Resource Center, right? And so this organization was started by a survivor herself, so a woman who had lost her son due to gun violence and other family members as well. Her name is Juanita Batchelor, and every time we have conversations and every time that I've learned more about the community, right? So I myself have only been a handful of times, but truly hearing from her about where those gaps existed and where she highlights too of, if there were these interventions in place or if these were models that we had within my community,
Yes.
we could curb the violence that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And I feel like from what you're mentioning too, like, yes, parents are trying their best, but that community also needs to wrap its arms around
and put it out there for the people to know about it. I think what it is like you were mentioning this, and I lived in Springfield and didn't know that that existed. You know what I mean? And I think what it is like really trying to, I guess, do a better job of marketing these organizations and maybe getting some more funding towards those organizations so that they can be able to put themselves out there. I love that there's social media now where you can be, more active and really promote your business. But it's hard when you don't know the resources that are available, or if there isn't any resources at all. So your child is just aimlessly at home or hanging out,
Right. And yeah, that funding piece is huge. Thinking about like, even if they do exist, making sure that they have adequate funds to continue to sustain themselves. Because if they, if there are a limited number of them, they're going to have an influx of folks.
Exactly.
So wanting to make sure that they have that too. Yeah. The next question that I had is just, from your perspective, how can we better integrate trauma-informed practices, mental health support into approaches of addressing and preventing gun violence?
That's a good question. I think working in the behavioral health space, I'm surrounded by it all the time. But when I'm outside of that and I'm talking to family, friends, or just strangers, they don't know what this place is. They don't understand it. They're like, what? You want me to talk to somebody? Why? So I think it's really just trying to eliminate the stigma of what therapy is and letting people know that it's okay to not be okay, but it's okay to go and acknowledge that you have something going on, that you're struggling, that you're hurt, and that you want to hurt someone because you don't have any other way to express what you're feeling. So I think really just being able to eliminate that, and that goes really, I think, for men too, because like I said, having a brother and then being a girl, I feel like I was very more vulnerable and more open and, talking about how I was feeling versus, once he started to go through what he was going through, he shut out, So now you're just acting out. Now you're committing, acts of violence and no one knows why. And you felt like you talked about it enough and you don't want to talk about it again. And you definitely don't want to go to a stranger and talk about what you're feeling because they don't know you. And if they don't look like us, then you definitely feel like, how would you even understand? So really just trying to eliminate the stigma of what therapy is and understanding that everyone has trauma. Even when you think you don't have trauma, you have trauma. There's something that you experience that still stick with you today. And if you have never dealt with it or talked about it or really got to the root of where it came from, you're going to continue to live your life and think about that. And it's going to pop up in different areas of your life. And then until you investigate it, you're going to continue to, go down the wrong path.
Right, and that makes me think about what you had mentioned earlier too about young people talking and talking, and sometimes it's not through physical words.
Yeah.
But
Just through
there's
actions.
people who are also listening, and then for individuals as well to be able to listen to themselves, that like maybe they're not recognizing that trauma is there, but through their actions, that's what it's telling them.
That's what it's telling people. Yeah, I think when you hear the word trauma, some people get scared, and they're like, "Oh, I don't have trauma," but it's okay. It's okay to have trauma. Like, but I think it's better for me, in my opinion, to talk through my trauma and understand why I do the things that I do. So I'm very big on like self-reflection and really understanding people and why, where did they come from? How were their parents? How were their parents' parents? How were they raised? And how did that affect them? And why are they doing the things that they do today?
Right, for sure. And I think of one last quote just to end this piece as well too.
Yeah.
And this also comes from the Transformational Prison Project. So I know that we've talked about it a little bit today, but they like to say hurt people, but healed people, heal people.
Oh my God, I heard that on a podcast the other day and I was like, I like that. Yeah. I always heard hurt people, but then the healed people really stuck with me because I agree with that 100%. I've been on my healing journey since, like I told you, the pandemic, and going to therapy has really just transformed me a lot. And it just opened my eyes to really have a lot of empathy and a better understanding of why, people in my life are the way that they are. And instead of, judging them and saying, oh, they're just like that, really trying to talk with them and understand, how did they get to be like that?
Yeah. And that compassionate lens is so important too, right? Mm-hmm. Like imagine if, everyone could have that lens when we're looking at either a perpetrator or a victim of gun violence. Right?
Absolutely.
And how much more power and collective healing we could continue to have.
I agree.
It's super important too. Yeah. So one of the last questions that I have for you, and I appreciate the time, is actually centered a little bit more on policy. So again, feel free to interpret that whatever feels best to you and the work that you've been doing.
Okay.
But wondering if you could share a stance about a specific instance where advocacy efforts directly influenced positive change in gun violence prevention and initiatives or policies, or just kind of, your thoughts around what policy reforms you'd like to see to address root causes of gun violence.
Ooh, I told you earlier, I am not a policy person. I do not follow that, but I am trying to get better with understanding our policies because it is important. I feel like, especially when it comes to guns, I told you earlier, I was never a gun person. Like, I was like, oh yeah, you want to take the guns off the streets, or you want to take the guns, you don't want people to have a gun. At first, I was okay with that. And I think the more I learned about, why people are owning guns, I understood because, I have single friends who have been robbed, going on a run, or, people who have experienced, just sexual abuse or things like that, where you feel like you weren't protected because you didn't have something to protect you. So I do feel the protection aspect of it should remain the way that it is. Like, people should have a gun because they need it for protection.
If you want to tackle this question, I think of your shirt, right?
Oh, yeah.
And think of how that can like come into play. So if you'd like to,
I think, yeah, okay. What I was saying is still tying into the shirt. For me, I'm not anti-gun. I think people should own a gun if they're owning it for the right reasons. I'm very anti-gun violence. Losing my brother and other family members to gun violence really just opened my eyes, and understanding that there are guns out here that are in the wrong hands. But I do feel like, people need to have that for protection. I think it's just a matter of finding out the people who have the guns who are doing the wrong things, why. Why? Where are they getting them from? Why are they doing this? And really just getting to that root cause. But I'm not anti-gun.
Yeah, and I think what's a good point there that we can draw into the policy conversation, as you said too, is also looking at root causes, right? So we don't always have to look solely at the guns themselves when we're talking about policy reform, but also thinking about how can we have better outcomes, like I've mentioned before, for like our system-involved young people, or for youth in general, right? Who, when we think about what's happening in the United States and kind of our culture, even here in the Commonwealth, firearms are the third leading cause of death for young people. ages 0 to 19. And I say
Oh my
0
goodness.
intentionally. So thinking about how even we're losing children here in the Commonwealth, and that there's so many other ways outside of looking just at the gun in terms of policy change that needs to happen too.
Absolutely. I guess that goes back to kind of the question we were talking about before, where it's like it comes down to what's available to the people in our community. Is there after school programs? Is there, and I also want to tie it into the programs. Some of them need to be free because, you know,
That's a huge barrier. Poverty as a root
you know,
cause.
I wouldn't consider, you know, myself to be in poverty, but even just me, you know, living where I live, it's hard to put my child in camp to be able to afford, you know, $200 and something every week. And then you can drop somebody off, or you can have your kid have a membership at the YMCA and they're, you know, going there, but you don't know who they're exposed to when they're there. So it's just, I think it comes down to just the opportunities that are available, just giving more opportunities to children. Being in the accelerator course, we got a chance to meet a lot of people who want to make change, people who are, you know, starting programs for teen girls, but also teen men, and trying to like get them more involved when they're in school, so that they don't leave school and don't know what to do next.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate you and the conversation today and your time. And so I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I really appreciate, you know, just you being here, the conversation that we've been able to have. But I'd also love if we're able to also shed some love for you and the work that you're doing. So would you like to provide the audience where they can best stay in touch with the work that you're doing, how they can help support your business?
Absolutely. So like I told you, we did rebrand. So you can find us on all social media platforms. That's LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram at YD Convo Starters.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you all.